Hello, everyone, and welcome to this important episode of Ignition Time. There are some dangerous signs that are emerging for the Democrats about the future of their legislative agenda. I'm not just talking about essentially the discord between the Democrats, specifically the involvement of the conservative senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, and the importance of Joe Manchin to President Biden in order to be able to accomplish the Build Back Better agenda. I'm talking about some disturbing signs that are actually emerging from voters in the suburbs. I'll also cover some discord within the Republican Party as the Republican leadership is beginning to wobble because the number two Republican in the United States Senate, after the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, is John Thune. And John Thune is not a good friend of former President Trump. In fact, former President Trump wants John Thune out. Let's cover these important segments in this episode of Ignition Time, everybody. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. This right here is a little bit of information about me. You'll learn more about who I am, what my journey has been like, and why you should listen to me. This channel, the Ignition Time channel, is about the country, economy, as well as your money. Let's just jump right in. Now, the outreach from the White House to the Republicans has been interesting at best. Here's an interesting tweet on your screen from Manu Raju over at CNN. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, told Manu Raju from CNN that he has spoken with the president just once since the inauguration of the president. But the White House has said that they've spoken with Mitch McConnell regularly. That's pretty interesting. McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, the equivalent of Mitch McConnell on the House side, has not heard from President Biden since the inauguration. Neither have other prominent Republicans, and some Republicans like Senator Susan Collins from Maine and Chuck Grassley from Iowa have indeed heard from the president. So what exactly is the president's calculation here? Here's a fascinating article from CNN that you'll see on your screen right now. And by the way, we'll always provide you with a link to all of our resources in the description section below, so make sure to check them out. Biden reaches out to some Republicans on Capitol Hill in DC, but not party leaders. Very interesting approach. I don't think the White House is making a mistake. I believe politics is all about timing, opportunity, tribalism, and perception. So there's something interesting going on here, and this is explored in this article. So what exactly is going on? Well, a new definition of bipartisanship is emerging as far as President Biden is concerned. This is really interesting. I'm going to quote directly from the article, and again, I'll provide you with the link to the article in the description section below. Privately, President Biden told Senate Democrats in a virtual meeting this week that bipartisanship is defined by what voters say, not what Mitch McConnell thinks, according to a person familiar with the remarks. And here's a comment from Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary. She said he doesn't believe that bipartisanship is defined by zip code here. He believes it is how we can deliver relief to the American people. Now, there are two Republicans who have indeed spoken with the president. One of them is Chuck Grassley, the senior senator, the senior most senator from Iowa, and the second is the centrist Republican Senator Susan Collins from Maine, who has known President Biden for a long time and in fact has a long working relationship with President Biden. Let's check out what Chuck Grassley said. And again, this is a quote from CNN. Chuck Grassley said, "I did something he liked," when he was asked about the reason for the phone call between him and President Biden. And Grassley also said he's got abysmal policies, but you can't help but like the guy. Pretty interesting comments from Chuck Grassley. And Senator Grassley told CNN that he and President Biden had a friendly conversation that lasted a couple of minutes a few weeks ago. And Grassley told the president that he could work with the president to lower prescription drug prices. In the meantime, here's what Senator Susan Collins from Maine said. She said, "My personal conversations with the president have been both productive, gracious, and welcoming." And she acknowledged that some of their early interactions were frustrating, but she said that now they have a constructive conversation going with the Chief of Staff of President Biden, Ron Klain. So it seems like the White House is speaking with some Republicans, but not others. And speaking of Republicans and Republican leadership, here's a headline of an article from Politico. McConnell's number two, in other words, the number two Republican in the US Senate, John Thune, is actually weighing his future as former President Trump plans to reshape the Republican Party by essentially trying to knock down individuals that he doesn't like. And the article reads, Senator John Thune is taking his time on re-election with the former president potentially standing in the way. And here's a quote from the article. John Thune could eventually succeed Mitch McConnell as the Senate's Republican leader, but the second-ranked Senate Republican has to decide whether to run for re-election with Donald Trump prepared to stand in his way. Here's another fascinating quote from the article. Thun acknowledged that the state of the Senate had nosedived during his 16 years in the chamber. He fears that things could become even more miserable for the Republican minority if Democrats kill the filibuster. Basically, John Thun said that things in the Senate had become much worse since he joined the Senate 16 years ago. Here's a comment from John Thun. We're losing a ton of talent, a ton of experience and expertise. And so, you hate to see quality people leave. And if the Democrats pursue the course they're on right now and try and do everything by pure majority rule, obviously it won't be a fun place to be. And he added, and this is important, it's probably as challenging today as it's ever been given the political environment. And then on top of that, you have the X factor, the influence of former President Trump, who is basically not a fan of John Thun. Now, one interesting guy who wants to be a peacemaker is a supporter of the president, the Republican from South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham. Here's a quote from Lindsey Graham. I don't know what President Trump is going to do in terms of primary endorsements, but I hope he'll look closely at Senator Thun. He's a great guy. It just matters what Thun wants to do. Basically, Lindsey Graham is saying, we don't know if Thun's going to run for re-election. And then Graham says, I hope he runs. I think he's been a great senator. And folks, John Thun is not the only one who's essentially facing the wrath of former President Trump. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska did vote to convict former President Trump in the impeachment trial, and she has signaled that she's going to be running again for re-election. And Trump has promised to campaign against her too, but she did win re-election in 2010 as a write-in candidate, and the new voting system in Alaska may actually make it easier for her to get re-elected in 2022. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And as this is happening, a fascinating story in The Atlantic. And here's a tweet from Edward Isaac Dover, who's a staff writer for The Atlantic. Democrats won the suburbs in the Trump years, which is how they won the presidency. Now, the fact that schools are not reopening yet in many suburbs is actually frustrating not only local residents and parents, but also top Democrats in those suburbs. And could this cost the Democrats dearly in the upcoming midterm elections? Could it lead to them losing the Senate and also losing the House? This is the subject of this fascinating article in The Atlantic. Here's the article. Democrats are failing the schools test. The fight between politicians, parents and teachers over school reopenings could soon start to affect elections and could backfire on the Democrats as they push through with their agenda, because the Democrats need control of the House and the Senate. At some point they will lose control, but could the failure of the school reopenings lead to the Democrats losing their majority much sooner than any of them anticipated? Check out this article in the description section below. You'll get a link to all of our resources, as always, in the description section below. And speaking of pushback, this time by business owners and by CEOs, let's show you this article on your screen from CNBC. Super Bowl of tax reform. Groups are gearing up. These are top business group CEOs. They are gearing up to fight with President Biden over the plan to raise taxes on the rich and on corporations. Now, as you know, as part of President Biden's massive Build Back Better agenda, the infrastructure proposal, President Biden wants to raise taxes on the wealthy and on corporations. But guess what? All these top corporations and their lobbyists and influential people are essentially, and these are the words of CNBC, advocacy groups from across the political spectrum, Republicans and Democrats, are preparing, I quote, an all-out war over President Biden's coming tax reform proposal. And conservative groups are planning to pressure some Democratic lawmakers who are facing re-election next year, because there are groups that are responsible for funding of various political campaigns. This is not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of political pushback and economic pushback and pushback from influencers as President Biden tries to raise taxes. And finally, since we mentioned former President Trump earlier, here's the headline of an article on your screen from Axios. Former President Trump is in talks with upstart social media apps about a new social network. Yeah, President Trump actually appears to be in final negotiations with an app called Free Space. Yes, he's in final negotiations with an app called Free Space. So we will see the re-emergence of former President Trump on a completely different social media channel, one that he presumably has partial control over and a business interest in, because we know there were talks between former President Trump's representatives and Parler while former President Trump was president to take ownership partially in Parler to make it his exclusive social media app. So there is no reason to assume that that is not the case right now. I'm sure we'll get an announcement very soon. I think that's going to be quite a bit of a head scratcher. Let's see what happens with the former President Trump. It's definitely going to be something that a lot of people are watching. Speaking of something that a lot of people are watching, I'm going to show you a quick video to wrap up this episode of Ignition Time from Senator Jerry Moran, the Republican from Kansas, who seems to be extremely upset about the fact that more people are going to be able to vote. He's not happy at all with the For the People's Act. And here's a comment from Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas. I've seen a few monstrous bills in my time in the United States Senate and in the House. This is one of the worst bills that I've seen that has a chance of becoming law. Let's roll the tape and hear from Senator Moran. Quite an interesting set of comments. Let's roll the tape and hear what he had to say.
I've seen a few monstrous bills in my time in the United States Senate and the House. This is one of the worst bills that I've seen that has a chance of becoming law. And I appreciate my colleagues' strong opposition to this legislation, and we must rally the American people. And it also may become the circumstance in which, as was indicated, the filibuster rule is set aside. It would be terrible for the United States of America and our citizens for the filibuster, the 60-vote rule, to be eliminated. It protects the minorities, and it brings people together in a necessity to get legislation passed with 60 votes. Do not use this monstrosity of a bill to further erode the power of United States senators and their ability to represent the American people. Do not use this bill to further erode the ability of Republicans and Democrats, the necessity of us working together to get 60 votes. And again, this legislation, it is a monstrosity because it takes something that is important and valuable to Kansans and transfers the authority, the right to vote, the ability to vote, the sanctity of our elections, transfers that authority to the nation's capital. The Constitution says it belongs with the states. I've been in every courthouse in Kansas. I've been in about every Secretary of State's office since I've been an adult, the state election officer. I have visited with county clerks, and I've been in county clerks' offices where they're counting votes on election night. Kansas has figured out how to have pretty secure and integrity in its elections. We have a lot of faith in our state Secretary of State and in our county elected officials. The burden to have a safe and a fair election rests with them. And we have passed legislation. We require voter ID. It's just common sense. I don't want to distract or destroy anybody's right to vote that is legally entitled to vote, but ID allows us to make sure that that person is legally entitled to vote. This is a serious issue for the American people. It's a serious issue for the future of the United States Senate, and very damning to democracy in our republic should it become law. Thank you.
That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Right here is a little bit of information about me. You'll learn more about who I am, what my journey has been like, and why you should listen to me. Check out my video. For us on this channel, we cover matters important to the country, the economy, as well as your money. For me, it's not about the red or the blue. It's about the red, white, and blue. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm American. We are all Americans first. Please click the like button. Please subscribe. Please enable notifications. It helps out the channel. It helps out the YouTube algorithm. And I would appreciate that if you take a minute of your time to do that. Just take 1 second to do that right now. All it takes is 1 second of your time. I would really appreciate it if you decide to do that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I work hard every single day for you. And I will see you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.